They don't tell you about the mistakes. When they talk about the Great War, they talk about heroes and victories, about brave boys who gave their lives for freedom. They don't talk about the boys who died because someone read a map wrong, because coordinates got mixed up, because an artillery spotter called in the wrong numbers and 300 pounds of high explosive landed on his own men instead of the enemy. They don't talk about living with that. My name is Robert Chen, and I killed 17 American soldiers in August of 1918. Not Germans, not the enemy. My own countrymen, boys from Iowa and Pennsylvania and Texas who trusted that the artillery would protect them, not murder them. I was the forward observer attached to the 77th Division, and I gave the order that ended their lives. I was good at my job. That's the hell of it. I was damn good at reading maps, at calculating coordinates, at calling in fire missions that put shells exactly where they needed to be. I'd been doing it since we landed in France in April, and I'd never made a mistake. Not once. My battery commander said I had a gift for it, said I could read terrain like other men read books. I grew up in San Francisco, son of immigrants who'd come over from China in the 1880s. My father worked on the railroads, saved every penny so his children could have better. When the draft came in 1917, I enlisted before they could call me up. Wanted to prove I was American, that I belonged. Wanted to show that a Chinese kid from California could serve his country just as well as anyone else. The Army made me an artillery spotter because I was good with numbers, good with maps. They trained me at Fort Sill in Oklahoma, taught me trigonometry and trajectory calculations, how to adjust fire based on wind and temperature and the angle of the ground. It was like a puzzle, and I was good at puzzles. Every mission was a problem to solve, and when you solved it right, when that shell landed exactly where you wanted it, there was satisfaction in that precision. I thought I was saving lives, thought every German position I helped destroy meant fewer American boys dying in trenches. I was proud of my work, proud of my accuracy. I kept a journal of every successful fire mission, every confirmed hit. I thought I was making a difference. Then came August 7th, 1918, the Aisne-Marne offensive. And I learned that being good at something doesn't matter when you make one mistake, one single mistake. That's all it takes to turn you into a murderer. We'd been pushing the Germans back for days. The Allies had finally turned the tide, and for the first time since I'd been in France, it felt like we might actually win this thing. The 77th Division had taken a German position near a town whose name I can't even pronounce anymore, and we were consolidating, preparing for the next push. I was in an observation post about half a mile behind the new front line. A shell-blasted building that used to be a farmhouse. Had a good view of the whole area through my binoculars. My radio operator, a kid from Missouri named Eddie Walsh, was with me. Eddie was 19, always humming to himself, always optimistic, even when everything around us was mud and death. The Germans started a counterattack around dawn. We could see them forming up in the tree line about 1,000 yards northeast of our position. This was standard. We'd take ground. They'd try to take it back. My job was to call in artillery to break up their attack before they could get organized. I set up my map board, took readings with my compass, calculated the coordinates. Everything by the book. Everything the way I'd done it 100 times before. The mathematics were clean, precise. I was confident. Fire mission, I radioed back to the battery. Enemy infantry massing for counterattack. Coordinates 48.234, 3.456. Request high explosive, pattern fire, 3 rounds. The battery commander confirmed. Coordinates received. Preparing to fire. I watched through my binoculars, waiting to see the shells land in that tree line. Waiting to see the Germans scatter, their attack broken before it began. Eddie was beside me, peering out through a gap in the shattered wall. Think we'll get 'em, Lieutenant? He asked. We'll get them, I said. I was always confident. That was my problem. I was so sure of myself, so certain in my calculations. The guns fired. I heard them in the distance, that distinctive crack boom of artillery. Counted off the seconds in my head. Trajectory, flight time, impact. 30 seconds. 40. Any moment now. The shells landed. I heard the explosions, but they weren't in the tree line. They were behind us. For about 2 seconds, I didn't understand what I was hearing. The sound was wrong. The direction was wrong. Then Eddie said, "Lieutenant? Lieutenant, that's..." The second salvo landed. 3 more shells exactly where I'd told them to fire, exactly where my coordinates had directed them, right on top of our own forward positions. I grabbed the radio. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it. "Cease fire, cease fire, check coordinates, abort mission." But they'd already fired the 3rd salvo. That's how artillery works. You call for 3 rounds, you get 3 rounds. 9 shells total, each one carrying enough explosive to create a crater 10 feet across. 9 shells that I directed onto American soldiers who were supposed to be safe behind the lines, who were eating breakfast and writing letters home and cleaning their rifles. The battery commander's voice came through the radio. "Confirming ceasefire. Observer, what's your status?" I couldn't answer. I was frozen, staring at the map board, at my calculations, trying to understand what had gone wrong. The numbers were right. The coordinates were correct. I double-checked them. I always double-checked. Eddie grabbed my arm. "We have to go. We have to help them." He was right. I shoved the radio at him and we ran toward where the shells had landed, toward the screaming. There's a sound men make when they're torn apart by shrapnel that's different from any other sound. Once you hear it, you never forget it. The forward position had been a row of hastily dug rifle pits and a makeshift command post in another ruined building. Now it was a smoking crater field. Bodies everywhere. Parts of bodies. The smell of explosive and burning flesh. I found Captain Morrison first. I'd met him the day before. He'd thanked me for the artillery support, said my fire missions had saved his company twice already. Now he was lying in a crater with both his legs gone, trying to hold his intestines inside his body, screaming for his mother. A medic was already there, but there was nothing he could do. Too much damage. Morrison looked at me, recognized my artillery spotter insignia, and his face changed. Through the pain, through the shock, understanding hit him. "You," he whispered, "you did this." I couldn't speak, couldn't move, just stood there while he died, while his blood soaked into the churned earth. There were others. Sergeant Hayes from Texas, who'd shown me pictures of his kids just yesterday. Dead. Private Wilson from Pennsylvania, who'd been writing a letter when the shells hit. I found his hand still clutching the pencil, but I couldn't find the rest of him. Lieutenant Brooks, Medic Johnson, corporal after private after private. 17 men. I counted them, made myself count them, made myself look at every face, every body, every piece. 17 men who'd woken up that morning thinking they were safe, that they'd survived another night, that maybe they'd make it home. Eddie was pulling at my arm, saying something, but I couldn't hear him. All I could hear was Morrison's last word. "You." They did an investigation. Standard procedure when friendly fire occurs. I had to explain what happened, show them my calculations, walk them through my methodology. The battery commander was there, the division artillery officer, even a colonel from Corps headquarters. I laid it all out. Showed them my map readings, my compass bearings, my coordinate calculations. Everything I'd done exactly by the book. That's when they found it. The map was wrong. Not my calculations, not my math. The map itself had an error, a printing mistake that shifted the grid reference by 500 meters. It was a new map, freshly issued, and someone at the print shop had made a mistake. One tiny error that had been multiplied across hundreds of copies, distributed to dozens of units. I'd done everything right. and 17 men were still dead. "It's not your fault, Lieutenant," the colonel said. "You followed correct procedure. The error was in the map production, not your calculations." Not my fault. Those words should have been a relief, should have absolved me. But how do you tell that to Captain Morrison, who died knowing I'd killed him? How do you explain to Sergeant Hayes's kids that their daddy died because of a printing error? They cleared me of any wrongdoing, put it in my service record that I'd performed my duties correctly, that the incident was due to faulty equipment. They even recommended me for a commendation for my quick response in ceasing fire. A commendation for killing 17 of my own men. Eddie tried to talk to me about it, said I had to let it go, that it wasn't my fault, that I couldn't have known. But Eddie hadn't seen Morrison's face, hadn't heard him say "you" with his dying breath, hadn't counted 17 bodies and known that each one died because of coordinates I'd called in. They wanted me to keep spotting, said I was too good at my job to waste, that the division needed experienced observers. I went back to work because that's what you do in the Army. You follow orders. You do your job. But everything had changed. Every fire mission became an agony of triple checking, quadruple checking. I'd spend 20 minutes confirming coordinates that should have taken 2. I'd call for ranging shots first, single rounds to verify I had the right location, even when that gave the enemy time to scatter. Better to lose the tactical advantage than risk killing my own men again. My accuracy suffered. My confidence was gone. I'd hesitate when I should have been decisive, double-guess myself when timing was critical. The battery commander noticed. Everyone noticed. The observer who'd been so precise, so reliable, now second-guessing every calculation, unable to trust his own judgment. They offered to transfer me, said maybe I needed a change of scenery, a fresh start. But how do you start fresh when you're carrying 17 ghosts? It happened again in September, not to me, to another spotter in a different division. He called in coordinates on an enemy position, and the shells landed on a company of French infantry. 23 dead. His map was correct. He'd just read it wrong, transposed 2 numbers in the heat of battle. When I heard about it, something broke inside me, because now I understood it wasn't just about faulty maps or printing errors. It was about the fundamental insanity of what we were doing. We were firing artillery at targets we couldn't see, trusting mathematics and maps and radio communications that could fail in 1,000 different ways. And when they failed, when something went wrong, men died. Our own men. I'd been telling myself that Morrison's death was tragic, but unavoidable, that the map error made it not my fault. But that other spotter, he'd read the map wrong, made a human error under stress. Was that his fault? Was he a murderer? Or was he just another kid trying to do his job in an impossible situation? I started having nightmares, not about Germans, about Morrison. He'd appear in my dreams, legless, bleeding out, and he'd point at me and say, "You," over and over. Sometimes it was all 17 of them, standing in a row, pointing at me, accusing me. I'd wake up screaming, drenched in sweat. Eddie found me one night, drunk in the observation post, crying. I'd stolen a bottle of cognac from an abandoned house, and I was trying to drink enough to stop seeing Morrison's face. "It wasn't your fault," Eddie said for the 100th time. "Then whose fault was it?" I shouted at him. "The printer who made the map, the officer who distributed it, the battery commander who fired the shells. Morrison's fault for being where the shells landed. Where does the blame stop, Eddie? When do I get to stop feeling like a murderer?" He didn't have an answer. Nobody did. The armistice came in November. The war was over. We'd won. The guns finally stopped, and everyone was celebrating. And all I could think about was that Morrison and Hayes and Wilson died for nothing. They didn't die fighting Germans. They died because I gave someone coordinates, and someone else pulled a lanyard, and mathematics did the rest. We were scheduled to ship home in December. I put in for a transfer instead, asked to stay in France with the occupation forces. The request was denied. They said I'd served my time, earned my discharge. Said I should go home, celebrate the victory, enjoy the peace we'd won. But how do you celebrate when you're haunted by the men you killed? How do you enjoy peace when there's a war still raging inside your head? I've been home for over 30 years now, back in San Francisco, living in the same neighborhood where I grew up. My father died 10 years ago, proud of his son, the veteran, never knowing what his son had done. My mother still lives, still asks me sometimes about the war. I tell her it was hard, but we did our duty. More lies. I never married. How could I? What would I tell a wife about the nightmares, about the nights I wake up calculating coordinates in my head, checking them over and over, trying to find the error that killed 17 men? What woman would want to build a life with a man who can't look at a map without feeling sick? I worked as a bookkeeper for years. Numbers were always easy for me, but I had to quit. Couldn't handle it anymore. Every calculation felt like calling in artillery. Every column of figures looked like coordinates. I'd find myself checking and rechecking simple addition, terrified of making a mistake, seeing Morrison's face every time I wrote down a number. I see them sometimes around the city. Not really. I know they're not real. But I'll be walking down the street and I'll see a man Morrison's age wearing a captain's uniform. And for a second, my heart stops. Or I'll hear someone with a Texas accent like Hayes, and I have to leave wherever I am, have to get outside where I can breathe. The Army gave me a medal, the Distinguished Service Cross, for extraordinary heroism in action against the enemy. They presented it at a ceremony with speeches and handshakes. I accepted it because refusing would have raised questions I couldn't answer. It's in a box somewhere in my apartment. I've never looked at it again. People thank me for my service sometimes. They see gray hair and assume I'm a veteran, ask if I fought in the Great War. I tell them yes and change the subject as fast as I can. Because what am I supposed to say? That I served my country by killing 17 of my fellow soldiers. That I was following procedure and doing everything right, and men still died because of me. The investigation said it wasn't my fault. The official record says I performed my duties correctly. But I gave the order. I called in those coordinates. I said, fire, and 17 men died. That's not something an official report can absolve. I've tried to find their families. Looked up Morrison in the casualty records, found his wife's address in Ohio. Wrote her a dozen letters trying to explain what happened, trying to apologize. Never sent any of them. What would I say? Sorry I killed your husband, but technically it was a map error, so it's okay. There is no version of that conversation that doesn't make it worse. Eddie writes me sometimes. He made it home to Missouri, got married, had kids, built a life. His letters are always cheerful, always asking how I'm doing, always saying he hopes I've found peace. I write back and lie, tell him everything's fine, that I'm doing well. He doesn't need to know that I'm still in that observation post, still watching those shells land in the wrong place, still counting bodies. The worst part is knowing that it's still happening. Not in war, the war's over, but the principle. Somewhere, right now, someone is making a decision based on information they trust, information that might be wrong. And when it's wrong, people die. And that person has to live with it, has to carry it, even though technically it wasn't their fault. That's what they don't tell you about modern war. It's not about bravery or courage or fighting the enemy face to face. It's about machines and mathematics and information systems that can fail in ways no one expects. And when they fail, when the numbers are wrong or the maps are printed incorrectly or someone transposes a digit, soldiers die. Sometimes they're the enemy. Sometimes they're your own men. I killed 17 American soldiers because I trusted a map, because I was good at my job, because I did everything right and the system failed anyway. And no investigation, no official report, no, it wasn't your fault can change that. They talk about the Great War like it was noble, like it meant something. Maybe it did for some people. But for me, it meant learning that you can do everything right and still destroy lives. That precision and accuracy and following procedure don't protect you from horror. That sometimes there is no enemy, just mistakes and bad luck and men dying for reasons that make no sense. I still see Morrison's face, 30 years later, and I still see him lying in that crater, legless and dying, looking at me with understanding and accusation. You, he said. And he was right. It was me. Not the printer who made the map error, not the gunners who fired the shells. Me. I gave the order. I'm the one who has to live with that. The war ended in 1918. The killing stopped. The armies went home. But for some of us, the war never ended. We're still fighting it, still living in those moments when everything went wrong, still trying to find a way to forgive ourselves for things that might not have been our fault, but were definitely our responsibility. I carry 17 names with me every day. Morrison, Hayes, Wilson, Brooks, Johnson, and 12 others whose names are burned into my memory. They don't make memorial walls for men who died from friendly fire. There's no monument to mistakes, just men like me, living quiet lives, haunted by the math that killed our own soldiers. They don't tell you about that. They don't tell you that you can survive a war without ever seeing the enemy, that you can become a killer by following orders correctly, that you can destroy lives with mathematics and good intentions. They don't tell you that it's not your fault doesn't heal anything. They don't tell you that precision can be just as deadly as chaos, that being good at your job can get men killed, that trust in maps, in information, in the systems we build, can be betrayed in ways that leave you empty. I still dream about that observation post, still see those shells landing in the wrong place, still count to 17 and know that each number is a man who died because I called in coordinates and trusted a map. That's my war, not glory or heroism or noble sacrifice. Just math and mistakes and 17 ghosts who follow me everywhere I go, reminding me that in modern war, you don't need to see the enemy to kill your friends. They gave me a medal for it. I've never forgiven myself, and I never will.